It's strange how some stories live inside us, even if they never happened to us directly. We don't remember them the way we remember our own lives, yet they shape the way we think, the way we feel, and even how we see the world. You might be sitting at a dinner table, laughing with your family, and suddenly your grandmother says something about the war. Her voice trembles, or her eyes go somewhere distant. And in that moment, you're not just hearing history, you're inheriting it. This is what happens when trauma doesn't end with one generation. It lingers. It changes form. It becomes part of family culture, part of how we love, how we fear, how we raise our children. Some people call it intergenerational trauma. Others don't have a name for it. They just know something heavy lives in the spaces between them and the people who came before. Let's imagine a boy named Sammy. He's 10. He's never seen a battlefield, never heard a bomb explode, but his grandfather did. His father did too. And while Sammy grows up in a place that may now be technically called post-war, everything around him still feels tense. His family doesn't talk openly about the past, but he can feel it. In the way his father flinches at loud noises, in the way his mother locks the door twice before bed, in the way his grandmother breaks down whenever she sees a certain kind of shoe. Sammy doesn't understand why, but he carries their fear. It's become part of him. Now think about a girl named Dana. She's a teenager, and she's grown up hearing stories about the enemy, not from textbooks, but from the people who love her most. Stories filled with pain, betrayal, horror. She's been told, "Never forget what they did to us." She wasn't there when it happened, but the emotion in her family's voice is real enough to make her believe it happened to her too. She feels loyalty, she feels anger, and without ever choosing it, she carries the weight of a war that ended before she was born. That's the power of memory, especially memory shaped by trauma. It doesn't fade out quietly. It repeats itself in echoes, in behaviors, in parenting styles, in stories passed down over dinner, or in the way someone avoids certain topics completely. Trauma can become part of family DNA, not just metaphorically, but literally. Studies have shown that intense stress can actually change how our genes function, and those changes can be passed on biologically to the next generation. But even without the science, we know this already. We've seen how people carry more than their own pain. We've seen the child who has panic attacks but doesn't know why. The adult who struggles with trust but can't explain it. We've seen it in communities that can't seem to heal because the past keeps finding new ways to come back. And what makes this more complex is that trauma rarely travels alone. It's often followed by fear. Fear of it happening again, fear of the other, fear that the world will never be safe. And over time, that fear doesn't just stay quiet inside us, it starts shaping how we see the world, who we trust, who we avoid, who we protect, who we blame. In many parts of the world, you see entire generations raised in the shadow of conflict. Palestinian children growing up under occupation, Israeli children growing up with air raid drills and shelters, children in South Sudan, Ukraine, Afghanistan, Sri Lanka, Colombia. So many places where the war never really ends, even when there's no shooting. The fear stays, the hatred lingers, and with every generation the story deepens. This kind of trauma creates an us versus them mindset. Because when a community has been hurt, it naturally wants to protect itself. And one way to do that is to teach its children who the enemy is. Sometimes this happens in obvious ways, through speeches, propaganda, school systems. But more often it happens quietly, a sigh when a certain name is mentioned, a story told with a bitter tone, a refusal to engage with those people. Children are incredibly perceptive. They pick up on these things long before they can analyze them. And here's the heartbreaking part. The next generation often doesn't realize that their beliefs about the world didn't come from their own experience. They were handed down. Handed down like a family heirloom, only instead of gold or jewelry, it's a legacy of fear, distrust, and sometimes hatred. All of it rooted in something very real, something very painful, but still, something they didn't choose. Resistance is another piece of this puzzle. For communities that have faced oppression, resistance becomes sacred. It becomes a way of saying, "We survived," a way of holding on to dignity and identity. But even resistance, when shaped by deep trauma, can become rigid, locked in a cycle of reaction rather than healing. It can start to define a people not just by what they stand for, but by what they stand against. And yet, there are cracks in this cycle, glimpses of something else, of healing, of change. There are parents who choose to speak the truth to their children, not in ways that scare them, but in ways that help them understand. Parents who say, "Yes, we've been through terrible things, but we don't have to hate. We don't have to fear everyone. We can tell the truth and still build something better." There are teachers who bring children from opposite sides of a conflict into the same room and let them tell their stories to each other, not to argue, but to listen. To hear that pain isn't exclusive, that trauma exists on both sides, that being right doesn't cancel out someone else's suffering. There are artists, writers, therapists, elders, and youth, all working in quiet ways to break the pattern, to say, "We don't want our children to carry this burden anymore." And while the cycle of trauma is powerful, it is not unbreakable. Healing is possible. It takes time. It takes effort. It takes a willingness to face very painful truths. But it can happen. Sometimes it starts with simply acknowledging the pain, saying, "Yes, this happened. Yes, it hurt. And no, we're not going to pretend it didn't." Because ignoring trauma only makes it grow in the shadows. Sometimes it starts with listening, really listening, to our elders, to our children, to the people we've been taught to fear. Sometimes it starts with stories, new stories, ones that honor survival but also imagine peace, that remember the past but don't let it define the future. If you've ever wondered why you feel certain things so deeply, why you react the way you do in moments of stress or fear, why certain topics feel heavy even when you don't know why, they might not be your burdens. They might be the echoes of a previous generation carried in your body, in your emotions, in your silence. And if that's true, then maybe you don't have to carry it forever. Maybe your generation gets to do something different. Maybe you get to choose what gets passed on next. Will it be the fear, the bitterness, the hatred? Or will it be the wisdom, the resilience, the hope? It doesn't mean forgetting what happened. It means deciding what the story becomes from here. Because trauma writes itself into the pages of families and communities. But healing writes the next chapter. And every single one of us has the power to hold the pen.